Hey guys, David here with the Abundant Harvest, and I'm here in Oak Creek Canyon about to visit a beautiful, magical apple orchard and talk with Ryan, who's the caretaker of this property, and it's going to be awesome. All right, so I am here with Ryan at Orchard Canyon on Oak Creek, and we're here in this beautiful, beautiful apple orchard talking about apples.
All things
apple
apples.
Ciders.
Yeah. And maybe other fruits in the mix, but we're beyond those now.
Awesome. Well, this is an incredible property here inside of Oak Creek Canyon in Sedona, Arizona, and it's just magnificent. We were just talking about being here on this beautiful day just after the rain and checking out this beautiful apple tree that is a pretty old tree, huh?
Yeah, this is a wine sap variety. It's an heirloom. It was planted with the original homesteaders 110 years ago. Apple trees can grow 120 years. I can see this tree doing that, and it's yielding incredible fruit, some of the best fruit on the property. It's a good yield. There's some props you can kind of see in the distance there, supporting the limbs because of the heavy fruit set. It's so far reached out, so it kind of helps prevent them from breaking.
Yeah, this is I mean, we'll have to move around with the video to show what's going on here, but there's, I don't know, 500 apples at least on here.
Yeah, it's so hard to count. Yeah. So this particular tree here is an open center. It has three leaders coming up, and the center opens up for sunlight and air to come in and help ripen up more fruit, versus a central leader, which would just be a center growing up in the middle and then kind of tapered out through prunings to allow air and sunlight to come into the fruit.
So why would you do a central leader versus a what is the other?
Open center.
Open center.
Yeah.
What's the difference or advantages or disadvantages?
Ooh, maybe you can yield more fruit on an open center. You got 3 central leaders coming up.
Gotcha.
And it may be a little bit easier to enter the center of the tree to harvest the fruit.
Yeah.
You can get a ladder in there a lot easier to pick versus a central leader. They're still doable to harvest, but it can be difficult sometimes getting that ladder placement on a well-established mature tree.
Yeah, definitely. And with the airflow and creating more space. And I mean, obviously, just one of the branches off of this tree right here would be an amazing trunk if it was the main trunk. Yeah. But this is the main trunk of this beautiful, gorgeous tree that's producing this abundance.
On this particular tree, all these trees are grafted, so the graft is graft is going onto a rootstock, and it's hard to tell right here, but it looks like this is maybe where the graft occurred, or maybe it was even up here. But they grafted onto a particular rootstock that might have benefits to that soil. Maybe it's nematode resistant or disease resistant, or might thrive in different soil conditions. So you graft a variety of apple that you want onto a rootstock, and then that apple variety will grow like its mother, versus an apple seed will highly unlikely not grow like its mother.
Yeah. But is it possible if you just plant a seed from the apple that it could be still edible and delicious? Because I know a lot of times people are like, don't ever plant a seed directly in the ground. You have to get the right rootstock, which is obviously going to be more reliable. But have you known or heard of people having success with just planting a seed from an apple and having an awesome apple tree?
Yes. Yeah. It's a surprise.
Yeah.
You don't really know what you're going to get. So usually it ends up like a crab apple, something small.
Okay.
But then sometimes it sizes up nice, colors up nice, and you get a good flavor of fruit out of it.
That's cool. There's just something exciting about the idea of planting a seed in the ground.
It is. And
watching it grow. But also, if you're creating an orchard like this, you want to have some reliability and not find out 10 years later that you don't have anything edible.
Yeah, because with orchards, it's a time frame of sampling of results. So it's not necessarily you're not going to know the results immediately with some experiments. Sometimes it's over years. You don't really know what if it's a seed you planted, for example, you don't know what that fruit's going to be until like 5 years down the road.
Yeah, that's a long time to invest in something without knowing.
Yeah.
I mean, unless you're just sampling and playing, which is could be fun too if you have the space.
Yeah. Grafting is pretty simple. There's multiple ways of doing it, different times of the year, depending on the type of graft. So cleft graft could happen in the springtime as trees are just coming out of the dormancy period.
Okay.
And then a T-budding can happen midsummer. And then you can tap into existing vegetative growth.
Gotcha. So you're just taking one variety that's existing
Yeah.
and then taking a known variety branch essentially,
Yeah.
and then bonding those two to create one
Yep.
living tree.
Yeah, it's pretty cool how they match that cambium layer.
Yeah.
And it can transfer nutrients, water, whatever.
It's crazy.
Yeah.
That's possible. That's cool. So
Yeah.
tell me a little bit about this tree, 110-year-old apple tree.
So the wine sap variety is, it's a sweet tart apple. It's crisp. It's a nice late season. It stores well. It makes nice for fresh eating and hard cider making. So if you're pressing into a cider, you can take that cider and then ferment it and have a hard cider. It's known for that as well, but it's also known for storing into the late season. It's being a late season variety has more difficulties. It's more prone to pests and disease, but mostly the pests of the codling moth. They can find their way into there. Most of the applications of treating a pest will happen in the springtime.
Okay.
As they're kind of coming out of dormancy as well. I can use a neem oil, a cold pressed whole plant neem oil, a karanja oil, and both of those before the vegetation's out can be sprayed all over the trunks of the trees. They can lay their eggs into the bark of the tree, and with this heavy fat oil going onto there acts as a suffocant, and it can smother the eggs. Neem oil has a active pesticide chemical in it called azadirachtin, and that can also, as the eggs mature, it can prevent them from maturing.
So is that harmful in any way? The neem oil and the other one that you mentioned, is that
Karanja?
Yeah, the karanja, is that something that is harmful to us in any way, or is that something that's an organic practice?
It is an organic practice. It actually can be used for skin treatment. You see it in toothpastes. It can be used as hair and as a conditioner, lice. So it's safe for human exposure.
Okay.
It's also full of fatty acids, which once the vegetation is out, and this neem oil, karanja oil, is on the surface of the leaf, the microbiology that is on the surface of the leaves, protecting the cellular walls, feed off of those fatty acids. So it's a food source for them, but also like as an organic pesticide for your nuisance.
Yeah. Wow.
The codling moth is our primary nuisance here. Other than that, it's diverse in different insect populations, but nothing's as much of a pest as the codling moth. And it finds its way in through the skin of the apple, trying to find a damaged one. And they seek the seed, which has the protein content. Yeah, not much for low hanging. So maybe something like this here.
Okay.
You can see these could be possible entry exits. There's a spot too. So if we open it up, you'll see them trail to the seed. This one, it looks like it tried to find its way in, but either bailed or I use a granulosis virus as well as for a pesticide, which is OMRI certified, and it's sprayed on the skin of the apple in the springtime.
Awesome.
So when a moth, the larva, try to find its way in, it's feeding off that skin, which has that granulosis virus on there, and it eventually takes out that larva.
So the OMRI certification, what exactly, who does, that's an organic certification?
Yes, USDA organic certified. It's a biological insecticide. Yeah, this one looks like it was, the defenses worked. It still has a little damage from the insect trying to enter, but the inside of the apple's been preserved.
That's cool.
Yeah.
I'd love to hear about your background, how you got into wanting to grow food and care for apple orchards and things like that.
Yeah, gosh. Life surprises you sometimes, but I do come from a background of farmers.
Okay.
They weren't fruit related, but I do have family farmers still producing large scale 1,000-acre fields of corn and soy in Nebraska. And just kind of observing those practices and kind of wanting to make an impact on a direction that I believed was going to be for the future and for the next generation, and building soil and versus depriving a soil through different practices.
So can you talk a little bit on that? Because I'm really interested in knowing about these practices and the soil and building up the soil.
Yeah. So I went to an agricultural college and studied business. And didn't really study the agricultural then. Just became fascinated with the direction of farming. Didn't know too much about it. Jumped into farming, small scale farming in Southwest Colorado, and I was like, wow, this is great, but this is really hard work for what it yields, but it's still attractive.
Yeah.
And the fascination with mycology, I think, is kind of what grew. The underground network of communications and so the mycelium, the fungi, and what relations it has with other microorganisms, bacteria primarily, and the efforts they can do together to help the immune systems of trees, the plant, the nutrient uptake, processing of carbon back into the soil. That was very important. So studying that and then coming across people who've been doing this for their entire life in a direction that I wanted to go that was proven to work. So they were holistic orchardists essentially, but it also has connections with agronomists, microbiologists, botanists, mycologists. So it was like a kind of a collaborated team effort and sharing that education, and they put it out there. So you find people who've been in the industry for a long time and proven that it works, and it's like, I want to do the same. So you kind of take that knowledge to your scale, to your environment, to your atmosphere, which each one's uniquely different soil types, different terrain, different slopes, different weather, and kind of implementing those practices locally.
That's incredible, man. I love to hear, just like on a high level, for people that aren't really familiar with this underground network that is happening, that there's actually things happening underneath the tree other than just soil and roots. Like there's what's going on underneath the ground, high level, very high level, that you're talking about with this mycelium and that network.
So let's say apparently there's in a healthy soil, there's in a cubic inch of soil, there's 8 miles of mycelium packed into a healthy block of soil. So 8 miles of that. Imagine how much is in a healthy few acre orchard. It's just this labyrinth network of communications. It's not, and as these mycelium spread out, they have their little hyphae fingers, mining and filling out other areas, communicating, transporting nutrients to the big network. It's all one entity. It's not like a brain of each. It's just one big like organism functioning and communicating like immediately. So it's systems spread out, but it's transferring that information through its whole system.
So what is it? What kind of information is it transferring?
And that could be, let's say there's a nutrient deposit over here, and it needs to mine that to this tree way over there that needs this nutrient. Through the linking of mycelial networks, it can communicate to other trees on the property. It can detect our footsteps, impacts of land.
When
a soil is disturbed, it can send out like different mycelium will come in and start restoring that area by kind of colonizing that area and sitting at fruitings, spores, releasing its spores, its seeds.
Like the mushrooms that come up?
The mushrooms, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, exactly. Not all varieties of mycelium fruit. So I think it's primarily ectomycelium that are generally forest related, but also disturbed areas or cultivated. And they bond, they attach to the outside of the root systems of plants, trees, and share nutrients that way, versus other mycelium that can enter, endomycelium, enter the cellular root walls of the plants and trees and exchange nutrients in the root system.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's incredible. So from one tree to the next,
Yeah.
it's sharing information, it's sharing nutrients, it's basically connecting those trees through this underground internet network.
Yeah. Kind of an internet network would be a good way. Yeah.
And they're all sharing information, they're sharing nutrients, they're helping one another.
Yep.
That's amazing.
And they're partnering with different bacterias to help mine, let's say, mine some minerals or nutrients that the plant would need for uptake.
Okay.
Phosphorus is required for plant growth, and it's mined by mycelium. So this mycelium spread out, it's mining for phosphorus. It's pulling it up for plant growth and uptake. The plant grows, eventually dies, falls, decomposes back into the soil again. Carbon's going back into the soil. The cycle kind of repeats.
Yeah.
And that's a food source for the microorganism, mostly the mycelium, that are the digesters, the decomposers, saprophytic.
So this underground network is also digesting and breaking down the organic matter.
Yeah,
that's insane.
Yeah, it's so beautiful, and
it's like there's this intelligence beyond what we see on the surface. People come to an apple orchard and they're like, "Wow, this is a beautiful apple." I mean, it is. It's just magnificent. But there's so much in an inch. You said there's 8 miles of this network inside of an 8 square inch.
Yeah, cubic inch
of living soil, of a cubic inch of living soil.
Yeah.
That's just incredible.
It's incredible.
So how are you feeding these trees? I'm just curious about that. I mean, obviously there's a lot going on as it is.
Yeah.
Just with the existing soil, this has been here for 110 years.
Yeah.
Probably the soil's been improved a lot over those years.
Absolutely.
Do you even need to add nutrients, or how does it get fed?
Yeah. So we do a gravity divert off of Oak Creek Canyon, and that's about a mile upstream, and that just gravity trickles to a higher portion of the property, which there's enough gravity pull to pull water down to pressurize to irrigate the orchard floor.
Awesome.
So that has its benefits, and just it's a spring-fed creek, so it's a spring-fed water essentially hitting this. And then for nutrients amendments that I would apply would be, after getting a soil test, you get an idea from an agronomist, recommendations on how much to amend with of what. For calcium, calcium is required both as a foliage application and a soil dressing.
Okay.
Potassium is often like a soil dressed. And there's different times of the year that you can apply different things, but the whole plant neem oil, karanja oil, is a nice springtime. It can be applied throughout the year. You don't want to do it around the flowering part of the fruit set. You want to wait till after that. There's nice windows of time where these things can be very beneficial. Hydrolyzed fish emulsion is an excellent thing to apply if you don't mind the smell.
Yeah.
It's like bringing the seed to the orchard.
Yeah.
It disappears fairly quickly, probably within a day, depending on the concentrate. But it's high in nitrogen, high in fatty acids again, so you got minerals, vitamins in that. Extremely beneficial for plant growth. There's kelp, which is beneficial all year round. In every spray, I usually put kelp.
And so are you foliar feeding them? Like, are you spraying the leaves, or are you just
Yes.
just putting it directly into the ground, or how are you doing that?
It's most of this is done through a foliar application, through a spray tank. So I'll mix these like small quantities into 200 gallons, 100 gallons of water, of creek water, ditch water, and then use that through a spray pressurized system so you can get into the upper canopy. Some of these being 20 feet tall, you need assistance getting that high. So in that mix, there's likely going to be teas of different forms, worm casting tea, that would be brewed about 20 hours before the spray. It's just, and a little bit of food source in front of that too. So I take like a handful, like maybe a couple cups of worm castings, put it into a cloth to contain all the sediment, and I put it in a vortex brewer, and it's using oxygen to bond. Well, the vortex brewer is using oxygen to bond to the water molecules, and then you're feeding molasses past that microorganism of worm castings and blowing up that population to larger numbers. So those larger numbers can go into a larger tank, and you have more numbers that you can apply to the canopy of the tree. Another thing is EM1. This gets into basic practices of Korean natural farming. It's a Lactobacillus casei, same way. You can take a batch of that, food source is molasses, sugar, and blow up that population. I also use a vortex brewer for that, and then apply that to a larger spray tank and apply to the upper canopy of the trees. And you can be liberal with both. Both are benefiting the foliage, and the overspray lands on the orchard floor.
So what do you mean by the population?
So the population will increase. It's feeding. So these little organisms that you have contained in a, I'll take the worm castings for example, in a cloth. They're going to start feeding off that molasses. They reproduce, and they're reproducing and reproducing quickly if the temperatures are right. So maybe like around 70 degrees. That's ideal environment for them to feed and reproduce quickly, and you can have large numbers in 18 hours. Depending on the temperatures, up to about 22 hours. There's a nice window of maximum production before they start tapering off and kind of dying off the other end.
So that is essentially a nutrient for the tree root system, or is that helping? What is that doing for the tree as far as trying to understand how it takes that in, or how it benefits the tree?
It's kind of like a defense. If you have like our gut biome, we have a beneficial microorganisms in our gut that protects us from disease, helps us break down food, it protects us from illnesses, and the same thing would be for the canopy and the cellular walls of the trees. Same thing would be for the floor, the root systems. So these beneficial microorganisms are the dominant. You're trying to encourage this as the dominant species on the vegetation, and it protects from intruders from coming in, finding their way into those cell walls and destroying, versus working with the tree and feeding off those non-beneficials and protecting the cellular walls, so the tree's health is overall better.
Gotcha. So like kind of like eating yogurt or like a probiotic or sauerkraut, stuff like that for us. It's kind of the same thing for a tree.
Same.
Yeah, that's awesome. You were talking a minute about how the carbon, you mentioned something about how the carbon gets into the soil with the tree, carbon sequestration, things like that. Can you tell us a little bit about that? And I know that was an aspect of how you got into this and a reason that got you into it. So I'm very interested in that, because I'm thinking about, hey, how can we make an impact on the planet? And,
absolutely. So more vegetation, more trees is pulling carbon from the atmosphere, and once that tree has that carbon, it will eventually die, fall down, decompose, get digested, pulled back down into the earth through microorganisms, worms, mycelium, and that's just pulling atmospheric carbon into soil carbon.
So it's not so we're not putting out more greenhouse gases and things like that into the Earth's atmosphere, causing, you know, more of an impact on our climate. We're keeping it into the ground where kind of it should be.
It's kind of a way of cooling, a global cooling. If there's a lot of vegetation, the Earth temp will be cooler. If there's lesser vegetation, it's a rise in more carbon in the atmosphere, which is, with the greenhouse gases, it creates a warming. So it kind of counters that with more vegetation.
That's awesome. So we need to plant more trees.
Plant more trees.
Yeah, and maybe ones that fruit too. Ideally.
It's beneficial. Mutual. It's benefiting both. Inoculating. So we take the prunings of the fruit trees, chip them, make these raised beds over here. I can show you here in a moment.
I'd love to check that out.
And inoculate them with the mushroom spawn. This one happens to be a gourmet edible mushroom when it fruits.
Wow.
And it's digesting, it's breaking down all that wood chips that was on the property. A lot of it's ramial wood chips, which is kind of like the very thin shoots of this year's growth, where there's a lot of nutrients in there. And it's breaking that down and putting it right back into the soil again.
Oh man.
And,
sorry. Continue.
And it's a pretty fast process. It's very clear like what it's doing. There's evidence right over there.
That's cool. I want to go check that out, but just so I'm clear, because this is really fascinating. So basically you're taking what's already on the land and then, you know, as you're using that product, which is natural, you know, broken down wood chips, putting it down into the soil. The mycelium is then breaking that down further and feeding the trees, nourishing the trees, helping them to have a network so they can speak to one another. And then that fruits up. Sometimes, in this case. And then now you have another byproduct, which is a gourmet mushroom. That's crazy. Let's go check that out.
Kind of like the fruit coming off of the tree that you wanted, right?
Yeah.
So you can have trees that don't fruit. That might be like just a vegetative growth. It could be beneficial in other ways. Or you have one that does fruit and offers food for us. So we encourage that too. Right,
exactly. Any tree is a good tree. And if it fruits, even better.
Do you want to try one?
I'd love to, for sure.
Give this one a go.
Oh man, check that out. Beautiful.
And you can see, watch all the yeast. There's a lot of yeast on that skin. All of this is beneficial yeast. There's millions of microorganisms on the surface, and then hundreds of millions in the core of the apple.
Oh wow. Man, you do not get anything like that in a store.
No. You probably won't even see the name in the store.
Wine sap.
I've
never heard of it before today. That might have been one of the best apples I've ever bitten into. I mean, it doesn't get any fresher.
Has that crisp bite to it. Sweet tart. So underneath the wine sap trees, we're cultivating wine cap mushrooms. So they're breaking down all the carbon and putting it back into the soil.
So did you name that, or is that actually the...
That's actually the name.
No way.
Rugulosa annulata is the Latin name.
Wow. That's awesome. Just so happened that way, or?
I kind of had to do that. And it's 100-year-old trees. It's already got an established system, so just kind of encouraging that, and being, just putting another food source around that, breaking that down for the trees. And a lot of that, let's go over there actually.
Yeah. Dude, I gotta say, this is magical right now, this apple. I'm not even kidding. Like, this is literally, like, you can just taste the aliveness inside of this. Because honestly, like, you know, I'm aware of, you know, I get a lot of stuff from my local farmers markets, and grow some food in my backyard, and then I get stuff from the grocery store too. And whenever I've tried, I mean, like, a good example is carrots. You know, you get a carrot from the grocery store, you get a carrot from like a really great, awesome local organic farm, and you try the difference, and one is really sweet and crunchy and colorful, and the ones at the grocery store, I think maybe because they've been, even the organic ones, you know, even because they've been sitting so long, I think they lose a lot of that the life inside of them, right?
Right. Yeah. Nutrients tend to break down over time.
Yeah.
So maybe nutrient content's gone lower. That the crispness.
Right.
Yeah. There's different ways of storing produce, but yeah, being fresh, like a farmer's market fresh, it's going to have most nutrient capacity, freshness, the crispness, microorganisms on there. I guess they're often washed off, but yeah, color is a nice indicator.
Yeah. Right. And yeah, you talk about the firmness or the crispness versus, I think, you can see also another example on the carrot is like it'll be kind of bendy when you get it from the store sometimes.
Yep.
Or, when you get it, from recently harvested, it'll just snap and you can hear the snap, and there's still that vibrancy inside of there. And again, it's like it's very sweet, almost like a fruit. So it's awesome. Yeah, let's go check out the
Wine caps.
Yeah. Awesome. Okay. What do we got here, Ryan?
Yeah, so these are fruiting wine cap mushrooms underneath the drip line of a wine sap tree.
Oh wow.
The drip line of a tree is this outer perimeter of foliage, and this is where, if you come down to the ground, this is where the feeder roots are of the tree. A majority of the feeder roots are. So with this mushroom bed, it's decomposing all this wood chips, all this food source, and putting it right back down into the feeding roots of the tree. So it kind of has a nice relationship. I believe these are ectomycelium. And fruit trees tend to be more of an endomycelium attractant, but it's still a beneficial part of the system. And to kind of see what they look like, you can see all these little fruiting bodies here, and these ones are starting to surface here. And what they're colonizing are the wood chips. So you see all these mycelial strands of white, and it's just wrapping around the wood chips, eventually breaking them down. And then as they break down, they send out little fruit bodies. And these are the mushroom part of the mycelium.
Wow.
A nice burgundy cap, sometimes a wide stem. This is the veil that hasn't opened yet. That indicates it's a young mushroom versus a mature one. So the veil is still intact, and you can get cross sections by getting an idea there, and then here's the cross section to help identify. If you weren't sure, there's the gills. They're still tucked in there nice and tight. So this is a pretty dense young mushroom. This could have fruited probably last night.
Wow. And it's already that size. It wasn't even
already this size.
What?
Yeah. So it's amazing how fast a mushroom can grow.
That's insane.
Another fascinating fact about mycelium is when it mines for nutrients in the soil, it secretes an acid and also uses a pressure to penetrate rock, break it down. I believe it's water through the mycelium that can use the pressure part along with the acid to break down the nutrients in that the minerals in that rock, and then transport it to wherever the demand's needed.
So it's mining minerals.
It's mining minerals. Yeah.
It's crazy.
Yeah.
From wherever it is. So it's a plant that went back down into the earth, broke down from the mycelium. That mycelium fruited, and we have
a gourmet edible mushroom.
Gourmet edible mushroom.
This I like to slice these thin, like this. Maybe not quite that thin, but that's the idea. Saute it in some olive oil or butter.
Wow.
Finish with some garlic and salt. It's a nice appetizer, a nice snack, a nice complement to a dish. Makes an excellent gravy.
Oh wow, yeah. So, I mean, obviously you have to know what you're getting into when you're eating mushrooms, right?
Always identify 100%.
Yeah.
Yeah. But these ones are definitely non-toxic, gourmet edible mushrooms.
So,
yeah.
But you're saying you inoculated this with this particular strain of mycelium. Am I understanding that right?
Correct. Yeah. So I'm taking it's a substrate that's been colonized.
Okay.
Through spores, and that substrate becomes spawn essentially So it can be a small bag, maybe 5-pound bag, and it's all dense. All you see is the white mycelium. And you can take clusters of that and feed wood chips, which is a larger food source for the mycelium to grow into. And then it eventually colonizes that. So this entire bed is that white mycelial strand that we just showed in that small piece of wood. The whole thing is just all held together. This is all dense. That's not moving.
So this is like a bed of life,
Yeah.
massive amount of life, right underneath the drip line of one of these wine sap 110-year-old trees.
Yeah.
And you're basically right where it needs the nutrients. It's being fed this incredible levels of mycelium, and so it can actually get in there and take out whatever it needs to feed itself and speak to the other trees around it and all these. How many trees are on this property?
170.
170 trees. Wow, that's awesome.
So it's about 3 acres of fruit trees, majority apple, with 17 varieties of apple.
Okay.
We have peaches, apricots, plums, nectarine, pear, prune plums, figs, and kiwis.
Wow, kiwis? No way.
Apricots, if I left that one out. Yeah.
Oh, that's awesome. That's one thing I'm not sure if we can grow in Phoenix, kiwis.
Yeah.
Might be a little bit hot for the kiwis.
I was surprised we could grow kiwis though.
That's why I'm surprised that you're growing figs up here too.
Yeah.
I guess there's varieties that'll withstand the cooler weather.
Yeah, I guess I think our growing zone is 8A.
Okay.
I think. And we can go, maybe it's, I think it's 8A. We're at about 5,000 feet in elevation, just under. And we get all seasons. So all the season, winter is snow, cold, teens at night. Sometimes we'll get 2 feet of snow in a storm. So and then summers can hit in the hundreds. And
wow,
we
that's
just
quite a range.
Yeah, it's got it offers a lot. Most apple varieties require a certain amount of chill hours.
Okay.
Over winter. So when they're under dormancy, when the buds open up, they need a certain amount of chill hours that winter. Generally around 600 to 800.
Depending on the type of apple.
On the type of apple. Yeah.
How do you calculate the chill hours?
It's the number of hours under 45 degrees.
Okay.
And that helps the. I think it's the buds to open up in the springtime. It's kind of like a germination.
Yeah, because in Phoenix, I know we're not getting anywhere near that. So there's like one variety of apple or 2 varieties of apple that actually can grow in Phoenix that are desert adapted.
Yep.
Which is cool. I've got one in my backyard, an Anna apple.
Anna.
From Israel, actually, is where that was cultivated. And the Golden Dorset, I believe those 2. And then there's an Einsheimer. Those are the 3 that I'm aware of.
Okay.
That'll grow in the desert.
Low chill hour.
Yeah, like 200 chill hours. Something like that. Yeah. So it's one thing that I've been really fascinated with. Whenever I come here, you've got this really cool barn, and I guess that's a place where you process the apples.
Yeah.
Can you tell me a little bit about that? How long it's been around? What you do there, and also I'd love to know about the cider too.
Yeah, let's take you to it.
Cool.
Yeah. Not all varieties will fruit every year. They tend to go through a 2-year fruiting cycle.
Okay.
So 1 year might be a heavy fruit set. And there's ways to manipulate this, but generally speaking, it goes through 1 year of heavy fruit set, and then next year is bud and vegetative development.
Okay.
There's timing with the way thinning is done in the springtime. You can encourage fruit set for the following year based on like the timing of the thinning.
Gotcha. Okay.
So with the amount of property that we have here, it works to be a 2-year cycle.
Gotcha. But you had a big harvest last year. I remember because I was here.
Yeah, that was the biggest we've ever had.
Wow.
Yeah.
And you have a good harvest this year.
It's a moderate year. Yeah, which was a shock.
Or moderate, I guess, compared to last year.
Correct. Yeah.
But the trees that we were just sitting in front of were pretty
heavy
loaded.
fruit set.
Yeah.
And another one is Golden Delicious. That's heavy fruit set this year.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Well,
Let's check out this
the processing.
this barn here. This processing. Really cool. Oak Creek apples. One of the most beautiful places on planet Earth, in my opinion. Oak Creek Canyon, and growing these apples, incredible.
Once we're ready to start pressing cider, we pull our inventory out of the cooler, so everything's chilled. It goes from harvest to cooler, stored in there, keeps everything crisp, fresh. We'll stock up our sweet side of the cider and our tart side of the cider separate, and mix those varieties of apples. They'll go in, they get dumped into here, and it goes through a polisher and brushes to kind of clean some of the debris. The apples come out on different grids of space for the apples to drop through. Small apples will end up here, large apples on the end. And it allows me to sort and mix different sizes and different varieties of apples. So I might have a box here. Once I get enough, dump them in here. Maybe some bigger ones, some small ones. And then it goes right back into the cooler once this is filled. The strategy for that is when we go into the cider room, when it's pressing day. We'll have our, again, sweet and tart sections. They get dumped into here. They go through a wash station, more brushes, get cleaned up. It'll channel down a ramp. This is the grinder. These little blades right here are eating the apples. So mixing the apples on that polisher machine, it allows different sizes to come in, so it's not all the same size. Let's say all large apples, it jams up easier. So it creates more efficiency. The apples get ground up. There's a metal pan down below, and then we use a rack and cloth practice through a cold press hydraulic press. We can stack 9 layers high of apple mash from the grinder, so it drops down. We contain it all through cloth, and we get 9 high. Once we get 9 high, we slide it underneath the hydraulic press. It squeezes out all of that juice, but contains the mash in the cloth. And a small pump will pump it up over that door through the tube into this 55-gallon drum. It would have 2 spigots mounted right here for bottling. Gets bottled right back into the cooler. Yeah. Do you want to try some cider?
Oh man, I'd love to. That sounds awesome. This is such a cool space. How long has this building been here?
This has probably been here, gosh, some of this equipment is from the 80s. The building was probably 10, 20 years before that.
Okay.
Yeah.
But have they been making cider and selling apples over the years? I was just curious.
Yeah.
I didn't really talk too much about the history of when they originally the original settlers began planting trees on this land.
So the cider pressing, like to this scale, here in Oak Creek Canyon, was, I think it was probably about 30 years ago is when they started high production.
Okay.
Of pressing into cider, selling apples. So the Oak Creek Canyon has many orchards, some of them from the original homesteaders. Some of them are abandoned, some of them are maintained. Sly Rock State Park, just down the canyon, is still being maintained. New fruit plantings since then, but it's irrigated with the creek water. It's just an extension of orchard practices here in the canyon. The soil is awesome. Cool air drainage is great. The water is abundant.
Yeah.
A little nice
Spring water.
Spring water. Yeah.
Yeah.
A riparian zone. Microclimate's excellent.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's there's a history of orchards here.
That's amazing.
And it's nice to continue that practice. Yeah.
Yeah. This is a recently pressed cider.
Yeah, this was pressed with 7 different varieties of apple: Gravenstein, Jonathan, Red Delicious, Pippin. There's 3 types of Jonathan in there.
Wow.
And some Macintosh.
Nice.
Yeah, it's a good
try it.
batch. And it's so this is raw, unpasteurized, and you can see it's not very clear. It's just like full-bodied, unfiltered.
Yeah. Cheers.
Yeah.
Oh man.
Drinking
Rich.
apples.
Yeah. So, a lot of people wonder maybe about pasteurization and things like that.
Yeah.
But what's the benefit of having a raw, unpasteurized cider versus maybe something else that's been pasteurized?
So pasteurized would turn into an apple juice. That's the terminology, and then cider would be unpasteurized. Benefits, microorganisms. Yeah, so it's the shelf life would be much shorter. You have a lot of benefits of the microorganisms that we were talking about, like on the skin of the apple and the core of the apple. And pasteurized would be pretty much sugar and apple flavor.
Gotcha.
And then, but the shelf life could be unrefrigerated. It can go on a shelf for longer periods of time.
Right. So there's a place for that, but if you want to get the real apple flavor as close as you can to what it really tastes like, with
and
the
the
7
benefits.
varieties, and the benefits, kind of similar to what the tree's getting from the mycelium, we're benefiting from all of that as the byproduct from the fruit.
Yeah.
Because we're getting all of those living organisms that are helping our microbiome, so we can take care of ourselves and keep ourselves healthy, and our immunity up, and so our bodies can take care of themselves without having to use all kinds of other things.
It helps. Yeah.
It's one of the things that we can do.
There's a saying: a doctor, an apple a day keeps the doctor away. Right?
I was thinking that. Yeah, absolutely. So maybe try 2 a day and see what happens.
I think diversification is always important too.
Absolutely. Yeah, totally. So, I'd like to just share about how someone can, who's in the Phoenix area or Sedona or Flagstaff, if they're in Arizona, what's the season like? Where can they find these apples if they want to buy some?
Yeah, so the apples, we're here in Oak Creek Canyon. Now you're welcome to give us a phone call. We can pre-arrange orders. We are at Flagstaff Farmers Market on Sundays, starting usually mid-September, and we'll go till they end in mid-October. After that, we might have a fruit stand here in the canyon, and we'll have cider and apples there across from Butterfly Garden and Don Holes.
Okay.
Yeah, and
nice.
This is the time of the year the leaves are starting to change, so you get multiple perks.
That's awesome.
Yeah, pick up some apples, fresh apples, cider, and see the leaves change.
So how long will it be till they can come? When's the last harvest do you foresee that someone can come back up here and pick and purchase apples? I know you're not doing U-pick, but
correct.
They can come up and purchase apples. When be the end of the harvest here?
I would say mid to end October. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it's that's our late season varieties. Some varieties, the Arkansas Black, for example, might benefit from a cold snap, like a nice frost. It changes the last of the starches into sugars, and it gives it a nice flavor and sweetens them up.
Awesome.
Kind of the final ripening for them.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So you can come up to Orchard Canyon on Oak Creek, give a call ahead to purchase apples here on the property.
Yeah.
Sunday Flagstaff Farmers Markets.
Yeah.
What time is that?
8 a.m. to noon.
8 a.m. to noon.
At the City Hall. And then the roadside stand will start happening the following weekend. So October 24th, I think, somewhere in that time frame, 23rd, 24th, 25th, on that weekend.
Okay.
We'll set up a roadside stand at Don Holes Butterfly Garden Inn.
Awesome. Well, if they're going to be able to have an opportunity to try one of those wine saps, man,
Yeah.
you guys got to get up here because that is the most amazing apple I've ever had.
Yeah. Cool.
And Ryan, thanks so much for
Yeah.
doing this interview and sharing this beautiful property.
You're welcome.
Really appreciate the opportunity to hang out with you, have some cider, and eat apples.
Thanks for
I'll
what
be-
you're doing, spreading the word, spread the education.
For sure, man,
Thank
for
you.
sure.